The urgent search operation continues for the second American on board a fighter jet that went down in Iran. U.S. officials say a crew member was rescued earlier today. This is the first U.S. warplane that has gone down in hostile territory since the war began 5 weeks ago. I want to bring into the conversation retired U.S. Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel Amy McGrath. She was the first woman to fly a combat mission for the Marines and flew over 2,000 flight hours on over 85 combat missions during her career. She's a candidate for the open Senate seat in Kentucky, and General Manner is still with us. Amy, let me begin with your background here as a former fighter pilot. Just talk us through the kind of training these crew members had to go through and prepare for, and what's at stake for them in this moment.
So I flew a very similar aircraft to the F-15 that was shot down on lots of combat missions in Iraq and Afghanistan and over hostile territory. And every single flight, we go over procedures of what happens if we are shot down or have to eject and over hostile territory. And I can tell you that we all know that the search and rescue units that are sent if we are shot down, those search and rescue units are the best. We know they are. We train with them. The first thing that people have to understand is the ejection itself from an aircraft that has been shot down is a very violent thing to undergo. And, you may not even survive an ejection. If you do, you might be injured. Once you're down on the ground, the first thing you're thinking about is evading and making sure that you stay away from anybody that might capture you. And then you're trying to get a hold of those combat search and rescue crews. And we have some communication equipment to be able to do that. We're trained on that. And again, we're briefed on these procedures, and we brief ourselves as aircrew every single mission. So highly trained here.
Amy, can I ask you about that ejection mechanism for a moment? Because if there were two service members on the plane, I was asking Mark about this earlier, how unlikely is it that they are not together and that during the ejection process they were separated and one was rescued and the other still status unknown?
Well, Eamon, when you have an ejection out of a plane like the F-15, both aircrew are going to be ejected very quickly, one right after the other. We're talking like within a second. So they're going to be in the same area. It's highly unlikely that one would not be ejected unless there was some malfunction there. And we just don't know that right now. This is ongoing, but they're probably in the same general area. It's not likely that one stayed in the aircraft and the other, was ejected out of the aircraft, if that's what you're asking.
Yeah, so to that point, General, you were talking about this a little bit in terms of the tools that are available for the military to conduct this search and rescue operation. What are the nature of the forces that are involved in this? You referenced your son earlier, but I suspect at some point there would be troops on the ground, American boots on the ground, going over this terrain, going over this territory, and perhaps even trying to secure the location from oncoming Iranian troops who may be also looking through that area.
Absolutely. And by the way, I want to definitely a shout out to Amy for her past service and continued service to our country. That's quite an honor to have her here. It will take hundreds of people in multiple aircraft to be able to retrieve that pilot. They are not likely to put boots on the ground in terms of the Air Force parajumpers unless they notice remains or a parachute or they receive the signal itself. So you're not going to just put troops on the ground to do searching. You're going to use thermal methods. You're going to use electronic means to be able to determine where they are. You have the capability with those HC-130s and the Blackhawks. These are highly skilled people to be able to go in and to be able to find either, again, the aircraft or parts of the aircraft, or to pick up any special signals and to help secure and safeguard the pilot once they locate him.
Amy, talk to us about how you viewed the president's comments today, where in the midst of all of this and, all of this country now concerned about the families of these service members and their well-being and the search and rescue operation, and then even those that are now going to go in harm's way to look for this second service member, and the president deciding to come out and post about oil against this backdrop.
I mean, every single time the president makes a post like this, it's just, it hurts. It hurts because we have men and women in harm's way right now, fighting for a war that he started without the backing of the American people, without the backing of Congress. I am thinking of all the air crew involved in this dangerous mission right now, this rescue mission. Reports of possibly other aircraft down. I just feel like the president is, it's just sad to see that focus right now. And 2 days ago, remember, he stood up in front of the American people and said the Iranians didn't have, their air defenses were decimated. Well, clearly that's not true. We're at war. He needs to be focused on that.
Yeah, you bring up an important point. In the past, he said Iran's nuclear program was obliterated. He said Iran's air defenses were decimated. And clearly, there's a bit of a disconnect there between that reality and what we're seeing play out. Do you believe this situation is escalating rapidly out of the control of the president? He said this war had been over in the first hour when we decapitated the Iranian regime. He said initially it could be a couple of days, maybe 2 to 3 weeks. We are now 5 weeks into this, and a couple of days ago, he told the American people it could be yet another 2 to 3 weeks.
The president has been all over the map. If anybody that listened or watched his speech 2 nights ago, he is all over the place. He does not know how to get out of this. He says that he's in negotiations right now, but he can't tell us with who. We somehow keep assassinating the people that we're supposed to be negotiating with. The Strait of Hormuz is still closed. He says that the Iranians, their air defenses have been destroyed, and yet they just shot down one of our aircraft. He is all over the place. And I'm very worried that, as I was worried when we got in this war, that it's not strategically sound. I don't think he has a strategy to get out of it.
General, I wanted to give you the final thought about the adherence to international law, because as we were talking about, the Iranian state TV is offering those bounties on Americans if any Iranian residents find that service member, to hand them over to Iranian security forces. And we juxtapose that with what we are hearing from our Secretary of Defense and our president, who is threatening to bomb power plants. We've already seen him bomb a bridge. We're hearing the Secretary of Defense saying effectively the rules of war don't apply to the way he's conducting this war. I'm just curious to get your thoughts on how you view what now is the perilous situation our service member finds himself in, and the rhetoric coming out of our own administration.
All of our military personnel are in greater risk than they have ever been before in terms of any other previous administration. We have a Secretary of Defense who has actually stated words in his speeches and in writing that are literally the words of potential war criminals. Even if the president pardons him for these things, The Hague will eventually come to get him. It's very disheartening whenever the Secretary of Defense, who we're supposed to look up to for guidance and counsel and strategy, is saying things about show no quarter, which by its quote is prohibited and defined in U.S. law as a war crime. The idea of attacking infrastructure that affects civilians is a war crime. So it goes on, and our military members start to question, what are we doing here if we're attacking, for example, a bridge under construction? It just doesn't make any sense in terms of what are the military objectives, which seem to keep changing on a regular basis. And if you don't have military objectives, and then you know when success has been achieved, that means all you're going to do is get further and further involved in this warfare, and it's going to go worse and worse for the United States and for the American public in terms of the oil prices, just as an example.